Michael Cashman, Labour MEP for the West Midlands. You've just been following this petition here in the Petitions Committee in the European Parliament. What do you make of the discussions that have been underway on the Hartlebury incinerator?
I think the really good principle is that the Petitions Committee agrees with the petitioners that there is a big issue of injustice, inequality. The contribution made by Jane this afternoon I think underscored all of the points, which is how can you have real access to the democratic process, ensuring that your local councils accept the right tender, deal with issues relative to the environment and people's quality of life, all of that. How can you have access to that democratic process if you don't have the same access to the information that the council have? How can you question whether they've made the right decision? How can you hold them accountable? And that's what we were doing this afternoon. I called for the petition to remain open because there's a case that is going against the UK to the European Court of Justice. Let's see what happens there, because there's a principle of fairness engaged in that, but equally about whether at the end of the day, when I have a report which is about access to information, whether we deal with the inequalities and the unfairness of the democratic process within my report, and then we can close it down if everyone's satisfied. But it's a long process.
There's a lot in there. I want to pick you up on a couple of points. Firstly, European law, which is what everyone here is dealing with. Are you convinced that in this case, and cases like it, European law has been broken because of issues like access to documents and so forth?
Well, in this instance, for the European Commission to take a member state to court is proof that they believe on the surface that the UK has not complied with EU law. It's not complied with something called the Aarhus Convention, which is about access to information relative to environmental matters. So the fact that there's a case means, on the face of it, they've broken EU law. They're not complying with it. On access to documents, the question mark is still hanging in the air. I want to see what the European Court of Justice comes to in its conclusion. But for me, the principle is democracy. Give people access to information so that they can hold people like me, buggers like me and the rest, accountable not only for what we say in public, but for how we vote in secret and the decisions that we take behind closed doors when we say it's all about commercial confidentiality. Protect the citizens. It's the best thing.
You mentioned at the beginning about your own role with access to information, access to data and so forth. Just explain what you're working on there.
Okay, there is an EU-wide law. It's got a very boring title, but it virtually gives every citizen the right to all documents held, received or produced by the three institutions, the Commission, the European Council and the European Parliament. We're revising that because some in the European Commission and in the Member States want to take away the rights that people currently have. We're revising it to ensure that those rights cannot be diluted, that we can build upon them and at the same time protect data protection, but not allow data protection to be used by some of the institutions as a way of getting round not supplying information which holds them and us accountable. So again, it's a part of the democratic toolbox of knowing what we do and whether it's in secret. And if it's classified, it has to be classified for very obvious rules. Protection of state secrets, internal security, anti-terrorism, that kind of stuff.
Down to the ground and down to the level of this particular incinerator, do you think something has gone wrong in the process in Hartlebury?
Yes. You know what's gone wrong with the process? They've failed to respect the democratic principle, which is if there is a tender, how much is it going to cost taxpayers, local community charge payers over the next 30 years? If we're protecting the environment, give us the proof. Let's see how we're reducing emissions. Let's hold local councillors, MPs, county councillors, all of us accountable by giving people the information upon which we took our decisions. And in this instance, that principle has not been respected.
Two final questions. One is, where does this take the campaigners like Jane Green that's come all the way out to Brussels to make her case? Where does it take the argument on the incinerator? Does it help things move forward in some way?
To be honest, it probably won't directly affect matters back home in the West Midlands. But the wider principles will affect elsewhere. And that's what campaigning and community campaigns are often about, which is to say, this has happened to us, we don't want it to happen to another community. And if we're prevented from having access to information on other big planning issues, let's prevent that kind of obstruction in future.
And just lastly, you mentioned that this petition is being left open. That means that the committee, the European Parliament, will discuss this again in future. How important is that? How important was that to you and for your constituents?
Very important, because if you close it down, it means that's it. There's no more community interest. There's no more interest from the Commission. The Parliament said, Commission, report back to us. We've said to the Commissioner, the petitioner, come back to the Parliament with more specific information. This isn't an aria, but I haven't even seen the fat lady enter the building. So the fat lady ain't singing yet. This is going to go on, and that's the brilliant thing. I said to Jane earlier, she walked into that petitions committee, the direct interface between the European institutions, a government which operates and agrees at EU level, and the citizen. Brilliant. Democracy in action. Fantastic.